What's going on, everyone? Chris from Pickdawgz.com here with your college football breakdown for Week 7. We're going to be talking about 10 games from the card going down on Saturday, October 12th, 2024. If you like this content, make sure you smash that thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. And if you're looking for my best bets, the games that I love the most, including my $15 best bet and my college football platinum play for the week, head to Pickdawgz.com and click the Premium Picks tab at the top of the page. We had a great week again last week. Maybe we hit some upsets with the breakdown. We had a few solid winners, some that didn't bounce our way, but that's just life, unfortunately. And I think that we're gonna come back and hit them hard again this week. I found a few spots that I really love on this card that I'm here to share with you guys. So let's not wait any longer. Let's get into the action. Our first game comes to us from Kenan Stadium. This one's going down at 12 p.m. Eastern on the CW as Georgia Tech visits North Carolina. Georgia Tech, a 4-point road favorite here. Total set at 56.5. And, for North Carolina, finally, they're about to have their bye week. They have had a game every week so far this season. They've yet to have a bye after this game. They'll have their week off before heading out to take on Virginia and Florida State. But this is a North Carolina team that, they haven't had a break go their way, and I unfortunately don't think that this one's going to go their way either. You look at North Carolina, that game against Pitt, they were in there nip and tuck. They were battling Pitt. That game was tied going into the fourth quarter before eventually the quality came through and Pitt pulled away. They had almost 400 passing yards in that game. So, while maybe you dock Pitt a couple points for that, I still think that North Carolina, just a hard team to get behind because they're not covering. They're 0-5-1 against the number on the year, and now they take on a Georgia Tech team that has been rock solid pretty much all season long. They're 4-2 straight up. They just got a nice double-digit win at home over Duke, and now they head out on the road. Now, sure, they're 0-2 in conference play on the road. They lost to Syracuse and lost to Louisville, but I just don't think that anything's going to be going right for North Carolina. For me, Georgia Tech is the better team on both ends of the field, and I'm going to go with Georgia Tech to win this one by a touchdown. Now we're heading to UB Stadium for some early afternoon action as you've got Buffalo playing host to Toledo. This one's going down at 12 p.m. Eastern on ESPNU. Toledo, a 9.5-point road favorite, total set at 44.5. And I'm going with Buffalo in the points in this one. We've already seen the Bulls face a team in a letdown spot. I think Toledo is in a letdown spot here. Toledo coming off of the big win in their revenge game from the MAC title game against Miami, Ohio last season. They won that game 30-20, and now it's a bit of a sandwich spot for the Rockets, who after this game have a gauntlet of games to run through against teams that they could very well be up against when it comes to the top of the MAC standings and playing in the MAC title game, as they have a road game against NIU, a home game against Bowling Green, and another road game against Eastern Michigan. Buffalo, on the other hand, they had a bye week. They had a chance to regroup. And yes, they're licking their wounds after being crushed by UConn in that game after beating Northern Illinois outright. They lost that game 47-3 to UConn. But I still think Buffalo, like I said, they've already beat Northern Illinois after Northern Illinois had a little bit of a big head after beating Notre Dame the week prior. And I think that Buffalo has a shot here. They've had an extra week to focus up and regroup and focus on this game. And like I said, I think that Toledo should be on upset alert here. So I'm going to take Buffalo here plus the 9.5. Tucker Gleason for Toledo. He's been careless. He's thrown 4 interceptions in his last 2 games. And Buffalo's pass defense has actually been fairly respectable. So I'm going to take a shot here on the Bulls plus the 9.5. Now we head to Rynearson Stadium for some more action as the Eagles of Eastern Mich host the Miami, Ohio Redhawks. This one's going down at 2 p.m. Eastern, and this one's going down on ESPN+. And, the thing that stands out for me in this game is that, that Eastern Mich is a home dog, because Miami, Ohio's 1-4 on the year, and Eastern Mich coming in at 4-1, and you would think, well, why is the team at, laying 2.5 on the road if they're 1-4? I think that a lot of folks are still hung up that this Miami, Ohio team is not performing as well as they should. They had Brett Gabbert come back. He was, the star quarterback for Miami, Ohio when he got injured. This was a team that struggled without him last season. But for me, I'm not dealing with a team that should be better than they are. The fact is they're still 1-4. Now, I get it. They've played Notre Dame. They've played Cincinnati. They've played Northwestern. And that's a battle-tested team. And Eastern Mich, yeah, they played Washington, they played UMass and Jacksonville State. So you could say, well, level of competition is much different. The reality is that now we're in a point where, teams are playing the same teams on their level. And, we just talked about how Miami, Ohio fell flat against Toledo. I think Eastern Michigan is live here. This is a team where I like to catch them in this spot as an underdog. Going back to the start of the 2021 season, Eastern Michigan 16-9 against the spread as an underdog, hitting at a 64% clip, and 11 of those wins have been outright victories. 11 of those covers have been outright victories. So I'm going to take Eastern Michigan here plus the 2.5. To me, it's just like I said, the line may seem funky to some. I'm just taking Eastern Michigan in a spot where I trust them. Now we head to McKay Stadium for an interesting matchup between Oregon State and Nevada. Oregon State laying 3, total set at 47.5. This one's going to be on CBS Sports Network at 7:30 Eastern. And I think Nevada's live here. Oregon State had that close call against Colorado State last week. It went to double overtime. It was a game that I thought Oregon State was going to win a lot easier than they did. And said they didn't get the cover there. And now they're up against it here. Against a Nevada team that I think is going to be up for the task. Oregon State also in a bit of a look-ahead spot, considering they have a home date with UNLV on deck, a really good UNLV team that's going to bring everything they have to that one because UNLV is challenging for that Group of 5 playoff spot. But Nevada, you could argue that this team, instead of being 2-4, had a couple of bounces gone their way, could easily be 5-1 going into this game. They almost beat SMU outright as 27-point home dogs, and the better that SMU looks, the better that cover looks for Nevada. They were unlucky to lose against Georgia Southern, and just last week, even though I was on San Jose State, Nevada could have easily won that game as well. They were up late in that game, and unfortunately gave up the touchdown with less than a minute to go to give San Jose State the win. But Brendan Lewis has given this Nevada offense some life, and I will admit, I think I admitted it last week in that going into that Georgia Southern game. San Jose State game, that I think Nevada is ahead of schedule. And I think that Nevada is going to be a team that, as long as they have Brendan Lewis, they can compete in games. Oregon State is banged up. And like I said, this just sets up, I think, as a bit of a look-ahead spot for Oregon State with UNLV on deck. So I'm going to take a shot here with Nevada plus the 3 points, maybe sprinkle a little bit on the money line as well. Now we go to Cajun Field for a Sun Belt matchup between the Louisiana Raging Cajuns and the App State Mountaineers. Louisiana laying 10, total it's set at 65. This one's going down at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. And full transparency, show of hands of who was dead wrong on App State. Yeah, I thought App State was going to be the team that could challenge for that Group of 5 playoff spot coming into the season. And I thought that they were going to be, let's start with where they went wrong. I thought they were going to be able to take advantage of what looked like a down Clemson team after the Georgia loss. Clemson hung 66 on them. Then they got the win over East Carolina, but then got rung up by South Alabama and Marshall. South Alabama and Marshall hanging 100 points on App State in the first 2 games of conference play for the Mountaineers. You're done. I'm sorry. There is no saving. This App State team was missing tackles left and right. They can't stop a nosebleed at this point. And was I disappointed with Louisiana's performance against Southern Miss? Absolutely. But this is still, a team that's played the bulk of their best football on the road. Their lone loss was to a decent Tulane team at home in the game that they were in there. Nip and tuck for the most part. Finished 41-33. But this looks like a Louisiana team that's pushing for a chance to play for the Sun Belt title. Maybe it's a fate of App State more than anything else, but I'm taking Louisiana here big. I'm laying the 10 points. Now we're heading to Kroger Field for an interesting matchup between the Kentucky Wildcats and the Vanderbilt Commodores. Kentucky laying 13.5, total set at 44.5. This one is going down at 7:45 p.m. Eastern on SEC Network. And obviously the question here is, how is, Vanderbilt going to, build on the biggest win in program history? I mean, let's call it what it is. Now, for Vanderbilt, I think, with a lot of folks, you just say, well, it's a letdown spot. You have the biggest win in program history. You're going to come out, you're bound to come out flat. I will say this, though. Diego Pavia has brought a swagger to Vanderbilt football that he had when he was at New Mexico State. And the first thing that popped into my mind was, well, New Mexico State upset Auburn last year. What happened after, Pavia and the Aggies upset Auburn? they went back to business and they beat Jacksonville State outright as 2.5-point home dogs. I get it. Kentucky and Jacksonville State, two completely different balls of wax. But for a Vanderbilt team that, Coach Clark Lee has said in a lot of these games, when he wants his team to be competitive, they're going to try to slow the pace down. Granted, he said that last week and finished 40-35. But this is a Kentucky team that likes to run the football. They like to play these grinded out style of games. And when you have these grinded out style kind of games, where we can even compare it to like service academy games where, it's run heavy. Possessions are hard to come by. I mean, maybe not this year's Army and Navy teams, but a lot of times when you were getting 2 touchdowns with a team like that, you took them because, like I said, possessions are key. And I think Vanderbilt is going to be up to the task. I think Vanderbilt's not taking that win for granted. It was nice, but I think Clark Lee's reminding his guys that, hey, we got to go back to work because there is still work to do. I think this one's going to be one of those grinded out kind of games. If Vanderbilt loses this game, I could see 24-14. So I'm going to go with Vanderbilt here plus the 13.5. Now we head to Carter Finley Stadium for a matchup between the NC State Wolfpack and the Syracuse Orange. ACC action going down at 8 p.m. Eastern ACC Network. Syracuse laying 3, total set at 53.5. And for NC State, man, this is a team that just hasn't been able to catch a break. You get Grayson McCall back in the fold, then he takes that vicious and terrifying hit to where he's knocked out of the game, stretched it off the field. And while that shook NC State in that game, I'll admit they at least were competitive in the loss to Wake Forest, but they still lost that game outright at home as 4-point favorites. They're still at home for this one, but I don't think they're going to have much success here either. This is a Syracuse team that, hasn't been all that spectacular on defense. They do have one of the best passing games in the country. Now admittedly, I'm not a Kyle McCord fan. There are times where I just look at his play and I'm like, does this guy have it between the ears? Because he makes some boneheaded plays. I could easily argue that Syracuse should have lost that game last week against UNLV on that final drive in 5 different places. There were 2 drop picks by UNLV, some phantom penalties that were called that shouldn't have been. But the reality is that Syracuse got that win. And while, you could look at it for Syracuse and say this could be a bit of a letdown, I think Syracuse shows up here. Syracuse, they have the 3rd best passing offense in the country in terms of yardage. They lead the country in pass attempts and completions per game. You're going up against middle-of-the-road NC State pass defense. And this is an NC State defense as a whole that is just susceptible across the board. If you're going to attack Syracuse, you got to be able to really attack them through the air. And, I just don't feel that NC State is built to do that now with C.J. Bailey looking like the full-time quarterback going forward for the Wolfpack. I just think the Syracuse is just heads and shoulders the better team in this matchup, and I don't think they have any problem dealing with NC State. I'm going to take Syracuse here. I'm going to lay the 3 points. Now we head to the Rose Bowl for a matchup between the UCLA Bruins and the Minnesota Golden Gophers. UCLA 4-point home dogs in this one. Total set at 40. This one's going down at 9 p.m. Eastern on Big Ten Network. And, Minnesota coming off of that win over USC last time out. They've been playing some decent football. They're 4-1 against the spread in their last 5. But this spread feels just a little bit funky. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is just a tough travel spot for Minnesota going cross country from USC to now from the home game against USC now to having to play UCLA at the Rose Bowl, and a bit of a letdown spot too after Minnesota's coming off of that upset win over USC last week as 9.5-point dogs. And I think that Minnesota's offense, which has been average at best to begin with, it's going to have some trouble here because I think UCLA, while UCLA hasn't been very good defensively this season, their only shot at keeping this game close is by turning this game into a bit of a slugfest. And I think that's the kind of game that Minnesota wants to play against UCLA anyways, because UCLA's offense has been terrible. 127th in total offense, 132nd out of 134 teams in rushing. They're just inside the top 100 in passing. And Minnesota's defense, 6th in total yardage allowed. Just top 10 in yards per play allowed, 2nd against the pass. For me, this just feels like an ugly game. Even if this is a bit of a blowout, I could see some. If this is a blowout, I could see 28-10. I could also see 21-17, something that falls on this number. I'm just going with the under 40 here. Not when I'm necessarily trying to rush to bet from a side perspective because this line does look funky. But, I just think that the under 40 is in play here. If you're into ugly Big Ten style football, you're going to want to tune into this one. Now we head to Folsom Field for a matchup between the Colorado Buffaloes and the Kansas State Wildcats. This one's going down at 10:15 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Kansas State laying 3.5 on the road. Total set at 55.5. And I'm going with the over here. When I look at this matchup, I think this is a strength versus strength spot, in terms of, one team's strength going up against the other team's weakness. Colorado, their strength is airing it out. And I will give them full credit for going into UCF, going into the bounce house prior to their bye week last week, and beating up on the Knights as 11.5-point dogs, winning that game by 27 points. Give them credit for it. Shedeur Sanders threw for 290 yards. He's thrown for 290 plus in 3 straight and 4 of 5 this season. And you're going up against a Kansas State defense that's still solid. They're above, the national average in total defense, but where they do their damage, Kansas State, is against the run. And Colorado, there's one thing you have to give them credit for, is that they know to not play to their weakness. This is a team that can't run the football. They're also not running the football because they can't. They're 124th in rushing yards per game, 121st in yards per carry, and they're running it at the 126th lowest clip in the country. So what are they doing? They're airing it out. That's where their strength is, and this is the spot to do it. Kansas State, for as good as Kansas State's defense has been in spots, are still 101st against the pass nationally. They're giving up a fairly high completion percentage. They're 104th in yards per completion allowed, 99th in yards per attempt allowed. So expect Colorado to be able to move the ball through the air. However, I also expect Kansas State to be able to run all over this below average Colorado defense. Colorado 86th against the rush, below national average in yards per carry allowed. This is a Kansas State offense that, despite running it at a pretty much a national average level, 58th most rushing attempts per game, they're 8th in the country in rushing and 2nd in yards per carry allowed. So for me, this is going to be a track meet. A lot of big plays in this game. I'm going with the over 55.5. And our final game on Week 7's breakdown takes us to the island where Hawaii is hosting Boise State. Boise State laying 20.5 points in this one. Total set at 59.5. This one's going down at 11 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. And the way that this line is inflated is because the Boise State's offense has been downright unstoppable for much of the season. 45-plus points scored in their 4 wins, and the 1 loss they had, they still put up 34 points against a really solid Oregon team at Outson. So give Boise State credit. However, it's worth noting that now this is the first time Boise State's going to be going out on the road since that loss to Oregon. And you're going to Hawaii in an environment where teams have sort of struggled before with focusing and keeping their attention, on the task at hand. Not to say Boise State won't, but the thing for me here is that, Boise's defense has still been susceptible. They gave up 30 points to Utah State last week. Granted, they scored 62. But if there's a defense that has a good chance at slowing down Ashton Genty, not completely, but enough to where their team can stay in the game, I think it's Hawaii. Hawaii, 63rd in yards per carry allowed, so around the national average. Top 50 in rushing yards allowed per game. I get it. It hasn't necessarily been the toughest schedule for Hawaii this season, but they face teams that like to run the football. And like I said, this is just a bit of a tricky spot for Boise State with their bye week next week, and then look ahead to a very, very key matchup with UNLV on deck. So I'm not saying that Hawaii's going to win this game outright, but could I see Hawaii sneak in the back door, maybe lose this game like 38-20? Absolutely, I could. I think Hawaii has a good shot at keeping this one in the back door. Timmy Chang and this run and shoot offense for Hawaii has done a good job of keeping this team in it in the past. So I'm going to take a shot here with Hawaii plus the 20.5 to round things out. That's it. That's your Week 7 college football breakdown. Appreciate each and every one of you for joining me along the ride. If you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at pickdawgz.com by clicking the Premium Picks tab at the top of the page. Make sure you smash that thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and make sure that you let me know your college football picks in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Good luck.